hopefully this will be as interesting for you as it has been for me. I'm really happy to participate this afternoon, and those that I was able to hear, I think, offered some very interesting perspectives. I'm particularly interested in disability because I am a speech and language pathologist. I am a faculty member in the Department of Communication Disorders. I have been very fortunate to have been thrown into a setting where I've worked with individuals that I was never trained to work with. So that I say fortunate because I've gotten a load of experience from that, and that's children who have emotional and behavioral disorders. Not something that I was trained for in my graduate program. No one talked to me about the relationship between communication disorders and emotional behavioral disorders, but happy to have been placed in that environment and to now be able to share information with my students. This discussion is actually taken from an article that I published with the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association Leader. So it's our professional publications magazine. And I did this a few years ago when I was working at a therapeutic day school. It's a high school. And these are children who have been expelled either temporarily or permanently from their neighborhood school or the school that they're attending for a number of reasons. It could have been that they have participated in some violent act. They were not able to contain themselves when communicating or interacting with teachers, so they had a number of problems. Some of them were just transitioning. They were there for a period of time, but others were there for an extended stay. Interestingly, while I don't work at the high school anymore, I now have the opportunity to work with the young children. So I'm working with 3 to 5-year-olds who have been identified as having emotional and behavioral disorders. And for those of you who are familiar with this disorder, we know that that's a little early to have that diagnosis. But it does afford me an opportunity to really gain greater knowledge of how to help them with that collaborative piece, and also to implement more of that collaborative approach that I learned about or that we put together as a solution for some of these issues when I was working at the high school. So just a little backdrop with this. I think I hadn't quite put my finger on it at the time that I was collaborating with other professionals at the high school, but I've come to realize since then that what began as a mere partnership just made sense for us to work together really was a part of something much bigger, and it was the establishment of an interprofessional work environment. And for those of us who are here at GSU, we've been talking quite a lot about interprofessional education and creating, helping our students to understand the importance of being a part of an interprofessional work environment and what that means. According to the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, the development of an interprofessional work environment requires enhanced collaboration. So if we can imagine what that might mean, that it's more than just asking the questions of my colleague of how a student is doing, but enhancing that collaboration so that it's active. There's active participation there. It's equal value placed on each healthcare professional's contributions, which is also important. But one of the key components of success really has to do with understanding the roles and responsibilities of each professional involved. And I hope that you'll be able to see some of that as I share my experience with you. So I want you to take note of that little guy to the left, the one under that red arrow. Pretty cool, right? This is Roberto. I want to introduce you to him. He's the one wearing the sunglasses and that had to be roped into sitting in with this picture. Had to call him at the last minute, and he reluctantly joined the group. Roberto is 8 years old, and I want to tell you a little bit more about him so that you have a better understanding of what a child who has an emotional and behavioral disorder might be like. So getting 8-year-old Roberto's attention and keeping it is a perennial challenge at home and at school. It's even more complicated by the fact that he's usually angry and aggressive. Roberto began demonstrating aggression, unresponsiveness to direction, and difficulty maintaining attention to task at around age 4. Today, that was according to his mom, and today he doesn't have difficulty, or he does have difficulty, getting along with his peers. He has a tendency to disrupt his classroom setting. He doesn't appear to care about participating in classroom activities. He doesn't follow rules. He has difficulty working in groups. He blames others for his negative behaviors. The list is going on and on and on. And many of us may have encountered a child like Roberto. He just has a different name. In addition to some of the behaviors that I've named, and it's quite a list for someone who's only 8 years old, we find that Roberto's not able to understand social rules. He has difficulty relating to others' personal space. So he doesn't know that it's inappropriate for him to get in someone's face or to take something that doesn't belong to him. He also demonstrates poor conflict resolution. So this is your child that's always going to be engaged in an argument of such. He doesn't understand that sometimes people just want to have a conversation with him. For him, it turns into an argument. And as you can probably imagine, Roberto also exhibits learning difficulties, limited communication skills, and poor self-esteem. And so again, many of us have encountered children like this one. And what I tell my students when we have this discussion about children with emotional and behavioral disorders and communication disorders is that how do we determine which comes first? So was it the fact that he had difficulty communicating that then resulted in his inability to relate to his peers, the low self-esteem? So how do we know which of these issues caused the other? So it's very difficult to identify that and work with this particular population. Roberto comes from a family of, he comes from a two-parent household where both of his parents have been on disability. And they receive disability payments for mental health disorders. So now we have a compounding factor. And he lives in a neighborhood that's plagued by violence. But what's unique about this particular family, or what I can say is unassumed about this family, is that they really care about what happens to him, and they want to see him succeed and to do better than they did. And so they've asked the school to provide or conduct an evaluation. And so they've gotten the full-scale evaluation with the psychologist has come, they've gotten speech, they've gotten learning disabilities, so all of that, he's gotten a full evaluation, and he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, emotional behavior disorder, and speech and language disorder. So children who, and youth like Roberto, who have been diagnosed with what we will call EBD, face a myriad of challenges that affect the development of academic and communication skills. So this presents a complex issue for academic professionals and related professionals and related personnel. In fact, with as many as 450,000 children being identified with emotional behaviors alone, it has become a national concern, because among these children, many of them will have a co-occurrence of emotional and behavioral disorders. So that's quite common. Other common co-occurrences would include attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and language disorders. So I hope that you're getting the complexity of this picture, because it is equally as complex when you're working with this child in person. So that's the child who has emotional behavioral disorder. Let's take a look at how it's impacted by language disorder. There are several studies which have noted that 50 to 80% of children with language disorders may have a co-occurring emotional behavioral disorder. And findings of school-based population studies indicate that as many as 88% of children identified with EBD had not even been evaluated for speech and language problems. Many studies have identified receptive and expressive language disorders for these children. However, their primary area of deficit is pragmatic skills. So this goes back to those major concerns with their being able to socialize in their environments. So there's poor social functioning. And what happens if these concerns go unaddressed? Well, certainly we know that they're going to have issues with poor communication skills and verbal skills, but in addition to that, when they're not able to interact with others successfully, we also have concerns for there being at increased risk for substance abuse and negative encounters with juvenile justice systems, as is the case for many young men and women that I've worked with. Those men and women that are in the high school, many of them have gone on to become involved with the juvenile justice system. So we are clear, I think, on the issue or the problems as they stand, that many children who have emotional behavioral disorders also have communication disorders, and conversely, many children who have language disorders may be at risk for having emotional behavioral disorders. So although a clear solution to this multifaceted dilemma has yet to be identified, the academic setting, so school settings, certainly play a role in fostering emotional development and adjustment of these youngsters identified with or at risk for the development of EBD. Interventions such as the one that I participated in, which is a social skills group, provide students with what they need to exercise strategies for positive conflict resolution and problem solving. These children are also better able to articulate their feelings as they occur. And these kinds of groups provide skills for communicative success and the time to use them in real life situations. Students are learning in social skills group to equate this time with with interacting with other individuals. They're learning how to develop social skills and also how to reciprocate these skills in other contexts. And so just to give you some examples, we may have met to talk about what might happen if they encountered a bully or if they were being teased. How might they work to resolve these issues? So the students would be responsible for problem solving some of those issues in their small groups and then bringing them to the larger group. We would talk about some of those issues or some of the ways that those solutions would be effective and some that were not so effective. As you can imagine, they thought of plenty of things that were not the best way to handle the situation, but we were able to reframe that and help them to see that there were better ways to do so. We decided, in looking at collaboration as a solution, that its importance was really built on us understanding that all environments, or that this kind of environment, must be established to support all of our students. And so collaboration didn't just end with it being something that the licensed clinical social worker did along with the speech pathologist, but it was important for all students to be able to reap the benefits of this collaborative effort. So as the SLP, my role in the management of students with EBD was particularly important because the students often have the speech and language disorders, as I mentioned, that go untreated, and conversely, a number of children with the language disorders also exhibit characteristics of EBD that may be unaddressed. So while there are a number of professionals that are involved in this collaboration on a larger scale, so we've got teachers and parents, and we've got the crisis interventionists, I think the marriage between the SLP and the licensed clinical social workers seemed quite natural. In the case of Roberto and students like him, we often found ourselves having those initial interactions or discussions where we would talk about what our goals were or what his performance might have been, what he did bad that day, or something that maybe we were able to identify that he did well. But thinking that there was something more for us to do, we began to think about this idea of how best to collaborate. So with my goals focusing on mainly, I guess, the improvement of communicative skills and the licensed clinical social workers' ability to help individuals cope with high levels of anxiety and frustration, both of us were able to offer our expertise in the use of varied strategies and appropriate standards for planning and facilitating intervention. And it's particularly important for these children who, at the very basic level, have difficulty expressing their wants and needs. They have difficulty expressing their feelings in communicating with family members, with teachers, and with peers. The social skills group therefore worked to provide an opportunity to practice target behaviors and develop knowledge, skill, and attitudes essential for educational, social, and workplace achievement. And there was also the development of related goals by the SLP and the LCSW, which can work to offer a number of benefits to all students who participate. So here are a few of the cross-disciplinary goals. Just to back up for a minute, understanding that children with EBD may have fewer opportunities to interact with other children, we kept those goals in mind. So some of the cross-disciplinary goals that I'll share with you today would be recognizing and using feeling words to describe personal feelings. And this sounds very basic when we're talking about high school students, but these are children that were not equipped to do that. So we had to give them the words to use. Saying positive things to themselves and to others. That's huge. My students are not even able to offer strengths about themselves and things that they do well. So imagine how difficult it is for children who have emotional behavioral disorders. Also, there was considering the perspective of another person, asking permission before using another's belongings, admitting to, these seem interesting, right? Asking permission, what a novel idea. But admitting to and accepting consequences for mistakes and using strategies to avoid conflict. So what were some of the outcomes? Well, participating in behavior and communication enhancing activities will increase opportunities to engage in positive peer interactions. Children were able to find or were given more opportunities to use words to express their feelings and emotions as well as to problem solve. The students, in our case, we saw that they were able to increase independence and self-regulation, which is huge. And for many of them, that's what assisted them in being, they were able to move forward into other settings. They didn't have to remain in this particular setting for extended periods of time. They were also able to use strategies to handle disappointment, frustration, and anger. And so I go back to this interprofessional education, which I mentioned before, because this model of collaboration really says to me that what we need to do is make sure that we are training our students at the undergraduate and graduate levels to be able to go into these kinds of settings and work with other professionals. So we know with IPE, their positive outcomes really support the necessity of collaboration. IPE, it helps students to learn discipline best practices while developing collaborative skills with other professionals, and students have the opportunity to share ideas, better understand situations from the perspectives of another discipline, and show respect in decision making. And so I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I was thrown into an environment that I had no background knowledge of, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity because now it's taught me to be a part of the larger picture and to provide for my students that the meaningful types of collaboration that they can have in their settings as well. That's it. Oh, are there any questions or comments? I saw some heads nodding. Anyone have a child that's like Roberto or seen one like that? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. All right, thank you.